fearing God isn't in vogue right now. God is nice and he likes me is a more up-to-the-minute mantra. Someone who's been a Christian for a number of years might remember a time before their conversion when the knowledge of God's presence filled them with fear, but we feel we know him better now, my mate God. And we've got scriptural backup for this kind of homey attitude, haven't we? Think of 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Well, there you are, you see. We'll come back to John's first letter at the end, but when we look into the Gospels, we find that although some types of fear are forbidden to disciples of Jesus, there is one sort that is specifically commanded. Let's look at some of the people in Luke's Gospel who were afraid. Just in the first 2 chapters you will find that Zechariah was gripped with fear, Mary was greatly troubled, and the shepherds were terrified. And the angelic message to all of them was, do not be afraid. Their fear was acknowledged and they were given words of reassurance. Their fear is not being rebuked. Some of the burden of it is being lifted from them because they have something to do. Being afraid was an entirely natural response for them. Don't you feel there would have been something inappropriate about a Zechariah or a Mary who said, "Oh, an angel of the Lord, where on earth did you spring from? What do you want?" Their fear, dealt with by God, converts into willing action. Same for Simon Peter in Luke 5:1-11. He's afraid because he knows he's a sinner and he finds himself in the Lord's presence. He could only reasonably be unafraid through a combination of arrogance and ignorance. Notice again how that fear becomes action, because here we find a pattern that will surely be helpful to us. First, his fear leads to confession. Then he hears Jesus tell him, "Don't be afraid, from now on you will catch men." And then he leaves the boat behind and follows Jesus. Fear, confession, listening to Jesus, and then acting on what Jesus says. When Peter, James and John go up the mountain with Jesus, you again see the connection between fear and listening. In Luke 9:33, Peter is blithering on about putting up some shelters so Moses and Elijah can prolong their stay. But then the cloud appeared and enveloped them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." So I shouldn't be too hasty to dismiss all the fear from my heart. Some of it serves a very good purpose, like making me stop, shut up, and listen to Jesus. Remember that the sick woman who touched the edge of Jesus' cloak? That's in Luke 8. She came trembling and fell at his feet. That's after she was healed. Most fear disables, but the one thing that godly fear seems to equip people for is drawing near to God. Because when we know him well enough to fear him, we know him well enough to realise he is our only hope. There is no alternative but to come to him. Once there, she hears how she comes to be healed. She hears Jesus say, "Go in peace." The peace that dismisses those fears has to come from him, not from her. Of course, sometimes fear stands in the way of faith. What does Jesus say to Jairus? "Don't be afraid, just believe." That's Luke 8:50. And in Luke 12, you can see Jesus telling them not to be afraid of persecution and poverty. But that's not all. He tells them in verses 5 and 6, "I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who after the killing of the body has power to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him." And then look in verse 7. "Don't be afraid, you're worth more than many sparrows." You might almost say the choice is fear God and nothing else, or don't fear him and fear everything else. Paul talks about working out our salvation in fear and trembling. That's Philippians 2:12. Peter talks about living our lives in reverent fear. 1 Peter 1:17. So is John the apostle who gets it wrong with the one who fears is not made perfect in love? No, of course he isn't. Look at the next verse. We love because he first loved us. Without the fear of the Lord in our hearts, I really don't see that happening. Do you?